Well, good morning. Okay, maybe it is afternoon. All right. Everyone's like, how can you have a lunch program called Good Morning Hudson when you start at noon? I said, well, no, we start at 11:45. See? So, and now I could say good afternoon. All right. So, welcome to the membership program for the Hudson Area Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Bureau. My name is Mary Claire Potter, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today. And thank you so much for venturing out. Where else would you want to be on a snowy, wintry, cold day, right?
Sure.
No. Well, we all came to hear Ted. I did. I wore the blue. I wore the colors. Yay. So that's because I got my picture taken with, he's not with the Timberwolves anymore, but Ricky Rubio and Kevin Love. And I'm just going to say
You sort of had a thing for Ricky Rubio.
Well, I know.
Those eyelashes. Everybody loves the eyelashes.
I know. But when I got the picture back and it was me and Kevin Love, I mean, seriously, it was like this. Here was me and here was Kevin Love. It was kind of comical. But a special thank you to today's sponsors of this program is Midwest One Bank. For more than 80 years, Midwest One Bank has been helping customers and communities succeed. As a community bank, Midwest One believes the positive actions each of us contributes to the success of all of us. Midwest One is proud to sponsor Good Morning Hudson. They wrote that. I didn't. I'm just saying. So I'd like Joel and the representatives from Midwest One to please stand and be recognized. Thank you all. You too could be a sponsor of an upcoming Good Morning Hudson program. You too, Mimi. Yeah, I know. You can think about that. So please see me after the program if you're interested in that. And I also want to give a special thank you to John Potter and the Phipps Center for the Arts for hosting us today, and to Susie Halverson and San Pedro Cafe for the catering. I heard she made an extra batch of cookies just for us. I know, I can't wait. So at each program, we provide an opportunity for new members to introduce themselves and tell us briefly about their company. And this is also a time for any new employees at a company or of a new business or any public officials or other guests. So I know we have a couple new members today. I know Katie. Katie was going to introduce herself.
Katie, I own Create Space, which is a DIY creative studio. We're above La Rue Marché on 2nd Street in downtown. We just moved in there in November. So come and we can help you make home decor. We provide all of the materials and instruction, and you get to come and have all the fun.
All right, welcome to Katie. Thank you. Any other new members here today or new employees to a company? Cole.
My name is Cole Scadson. I'm with the O'Connell Family Funeral Home here in town. I am a funeral director and in charge of crematory operations now. This is my first chamber meeting, so thank you all for allowing me to be here.
All right, well, thanks for being here, Cole. Cole told me he is a die-hard Timberwolves fan.
Awesome.
So thank you, Ted, for bringing him out. Is there anyone else that I should call upon today? See, now you're going to know how this works. See? Yes, there you go.
I'm Alicia Cunningham. I'm the new executive officer for St. Croix Valley Home Builders Association. So we've been a member of Chamber for a long time. I'm just new, and this is my first meeting.
All right, well, welcome, Alicia. Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed or I haven't called upon? Okay, wait till next month. All right. What's hot in the community? Each month we will hear about what's going on in and around the community. Today we have two different topics that we're going to cover. First, I'm going to invite Kathy, the chair of the Chamber Board of Directors for 2019, to come up and say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is one of my favorite programs because it's a great mix of the businesses and what we do here in Hudson. For those of you who don't know me, I am Kathy Abladinger. I am the chair for the board this year in 2019. So I'm available to all of you if you do need it, and I look forward to this upcoming year. It's going to be really exciting. Mary has big plans for us and is keeping us very busy, and I'm glad that we can support her and the staff in their efforts. So thank you. I look forward to working with more of you this year.
Thank you, Kathy. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jamie Cortez with Health Max Chiropractic and Leanne Van Allen with the University of River Falls Hudson Center to talk about Leadership Hudson.
I can start, sure. Well, thank you, everybody, and welcome. We wanted to take a few minutes and talk about Leadership Hudson, as Mary Claire stated. How many of you, just show of hands, how many of you have heard of Leadership Hudson through the Chamber? So we've got a good group, all right, so you can be our ambassadors. We are now accepting applications for the new cohort for 2019-2020. It's a 9-month program, as many of you know. Great opportunity to really engage within the community. We are both alumni from Leadership Hudson. Had a great experience. I think the survey, Mary Claire, that you sent out at the end of 2018, have to get used to which year I'm in here, gave really, really positive feedback on the program overall. Over 55% of respondents rated it as excellent or good. So we see an opportunity to continue to grow that, to continue to grow our alumni through that Leadership Hudson network. We want to thank our sponsors, Cardinal Health and Excel Energy, for doing a great job and providing just a great venue for the program. I myself grew up in Hudson, so for me, when I had the opportunity to join the program, it gave me the opportunity to really re-engage with a lot of components of Hudson that I hadn't been involved with for quite some time, kind of walking down memory lane a little bit, but also finding out a lot about all the different outreach and programs and everything and opportunities within this great community. So very, very rewarding opportunity for all of us to really engage. So wanted to put that plug in, and I know Dr. Jamie has a few words as well.
Okay, so if she didn't entice you to join Leadership Hudson, I'm going to try to. When I first opened my practice, it's been 4 years, I wanted to get to know the community, get to know who was in my community. So when I learned about Leadership Hudson, 2 things drew me in. First, there was a leadership component. So when you come to your leadership class, it's once a month. So we had Tuesdays, I think you guys were Tuesdays, for 9 months, like Leanne said. And every month there was a leadership component, and our group focused on the DISC profile. And as most of you know, if you've done any kind of personality profile with any profession, you are going to learn you have to learn how to deal with all the different personalities. And so it was a really great opportunity for me to learn and grow as a leader. And so that's what I wanted when I first started in Hudson, to grow my business and to become a stronger leader. So Leadership Hudson really helped me with that. The other really great thing, and what I think most people should join Leadership Hudson for, is the actual community part. We went every month to a different part of the community, whether it was the community life, business and industry, education, health and human services, government, arts and culture, and the environment. So every month we got to explore a different part of, or different aspect of Hudson, which I think as a Hudson person, you want to be able to refer people to people in Hudson, and you want to know more about your community. So if you are driven to learn more about Hudson, to grow as a leader, I would highly encourage you to become part of the new class of the Leadership Hudson. And what we've been doing is we're keeping Leadership Hudson going. So we have a Leadership Hudson alumni, which we still get together. We have leadership components, and we still do tours, and we still try to grow within the community. So, who's with us? 2019. So I think that's all we have.
All right. Thank you, Leanne and Dr. Jamie. It is a great program if you haven't had an opportunity to go through it. So we are taking applications now. So encourage you to think about it or think about your staff members. All right, I know this is one of the top favorite reasons that you come to these meetings is to network, right? All right, so what we're going to do, I'm going to ask you to take out 5 business cards, And if you don't have business cards with you next month, remember we have lots of printers who can print them for you. But exchange with those around you, and I'll bring you back in 3 minutes. All right, well, thank you so much. So hopefully you all have met some folks that maybe you haven't met before. And next time you'll bring even more business cards, I know. All right, at this time it's my pleasure to introduce today's featured speaker and a longtime friend of mine, Ted Johnson. Ted is entering his 14th season as Chief Strategy Officer with the Minnesota Timberwolves and Lynx and his 16th season with the organization. He previously served as Chief Marketing Officer and Vice President of Communications. In his current role, Ted is responsible for leading long-term growth initiatives for the organization. In addition to that, he oversees the communications, community engagement, basketball academy, and technology departments, which includes the Fast Break Foundation, broadcast partnerships, the team's facilities, and public affairs efforts. He also oversees the team's G League franchise in Des Moines, Iowa. Ted's recent projects include spearheading the development of the award-winning training center at Mayo Clinic Square, and truly it is award-winning,
Well,
right?
Thanks to you. Yeah.
But, and teams from all over the world have come to view that center to see what they have done, and overseeing the $140 million Target Center renovation. How many of you have seen that renovation? It is amazing, excellent, very good. So I could go on and on and on about Ted. That's because he has so much successes, but I am going to tighten this a little bit so we can hear more from him. But prior to joining the Timberwolves, he spent a decade managing dynamic, multifaceted campaigns for clients, policy issues, and political candidates, including his time working with President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. So, because I love that photo in your office, so I had to ask you about that. So Ted's work has been widely recognized in the industry, including 2 regional Emmy Awards, 2 Gold Sabers, and a Silver Anvil, and more than a dozen other development and communications industry awards. He is very active in the Twin Cities community, serving on a number of boards, and most recently as chair of the Minneapolis Regional Chamber of Commerce. Please join me in giving a warm Hudson welcome to Ted Johnson.
That was beautiful.
Right?
Thank you, thank you. I'm going to do this if it's okay. I hate standing behind a podium. I'd rather kind of walk around and talk a bit. Plus, it keeps our good friend here with the camera, it keeps you awake, right? Because you have to follow me around as I pace. Well, hey, thanks for having me, Mary Claire. I wouldn't have missed this for the world. I've known Mary Claire. What, did we ever figure it out? I mean, it's been more than a decade with her time with the Chamber and with AECom, one of the companies that she worked for previously. And you know, she has been one of the people in my career that has helped me as a common theme we're going to hear sort of today as I've gone through my career is I've had to sort of constantly learn and evolve. And when you have a job like that, you're constantly leaning on your network and people that you know to help you along the way and learn. And Mary Claire has been one of those people in my life, and so I'm more than happy. I couldn't be more pleased to come out and join you all today. So I'm also a big believer and fan of the Chamber. Appreciate everything that you do. You know, I'm a big believer, although so I worked in Democratic politics. That's how I got my start. And my friends think it's a real hoot that I'm the chair of the Minneapolis Chamber of Commerce, right? But I'm a big believer in citizenship, ultimately. And everything that you do, the engagement, whether it be through advocacy on political and policy issues or just simply sort of making your community stronger is a really important thing. And I think it's something that is disappearing in our society. So I just applaud all of you for being engaged and taking the time, and I think it's really critically important. So congratulations, and appreciate everything that you're doing on that front as well. So I have a bit of an unusual story or career path, I guess. Grew up in Coon Rapids, Minnesota, went to school in Duluth, UMD. Another Bulldog? Whoop, whoop. The hockey team sucked when I was there, but I mean, they subsequently got a lot better. I fell in that period between Brett Hull and the national championships, so it was sort of, nowhere land. But I was going to be a lawyer, and got involved on campus. I was one of those type A guys. I got involved with about 8 different clubs, and by my senior year I was running 6 of the clubs, and I was active in politics. And I discovered a path in politics that didn't involve a $100,000 sort of bill at the end of law school, and so I decided rather than go to law school, I was just going to get involved in politics and public policy. And it really turned into a tremendous sort of 10-year career. Worked at the state legislature, I worked for Attorney General Skip Humphrey, I worked for a member of Congress, I worked for the Clintons, and really sort of gave me the toolbox and the tools that I still use today in my job. And it's a non-traditional training, and I found when I moved over to the business world, there was a bit of a translation that had to happen, right? Most people thought, well, the campaigns, aren't you all volunteers? I said, well, no, actually at 26, I had a budget of $4 million and a staff of 40, and just like a business, you're running a large sort of operation, but you're trained to live in a world that's very dynamic, it's fast-paced. You need to sort of set strategic pillars or wayfinding markers, but in between, a lot changes, and you have to be able to adapt and change. And one moment, I might be writing white paper on Medicare reform, and the next moment I'm talking about the Clinton COPS program, and then I'm drafting a speech on feedlots and sewer lagoons. And so it teaches you very quickly to quickly sort of break down a topic, understand its component parts, prioritize what's sort of relevant, and sort of build your action plan amongst the key variables that may sort of move or change a specific topic. And those are the same skills I use today. So I got out of politics, I went into PR and worked in an agency for 4 years, was going to step out to start a small business with my sister, and I took a call from the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I'm a kid that grew up playing hockey. I was more comfortable in weather like this and strapping on the skates and going out and skating than I was with having my hands on a basketball. I didn't have any friends that were basketball players, so I sort of thought long and hard, do I return the call? And I'm not a big sports guy. I love sports, I play sports, but I'm not sitting on ESPN watching SportsCenter either. My first love was public policy and all these other things. And it took a friend of mine to knock me in the head to say, are you crazy, man? It's the Minnesota Timberwolves. You got to return the call. And I'm glad I did, because it's led to an incredible career, 16 years with the team. I've held a number of different roles. I came in initially to run communications. By 2007, I became the chief marketing officer and essentially was running half of the business operations for the team. And then in 2016, changed over to chief strategy officer, which is maybe more of a recognition of the role that I had developed over time and really sort of created over the previous couple of years. And so today I thought what I would do is I'm going to leave time for questions and answers. And I'm sure a lot of you have questions about the things that we all think about when we think about the Timberwolves, whether it be players. And I should say we actually run the Minnesota Lynx. We have the Iowa team. We have a new team coming up. I'll talk about an esports team called T-Wolves Gaming. So we actually have 4 franchises. So I'll leave time for that. But I thought the majority of my time up here, I was going to talk about the Timberwolves that you don't necessarily know, that you don't necessarily think about more from a business perspective, that gives you a bit of an insight into how we think, how we're positioning the team for success here today and really into the future. And it also maybe gives you a bit of a glimpse as well into the NBA, which I find terribly, terribly exciting. If you think about it, the NBA, when David Stern took over, was a $350 million enterprise. Today it's a $7 billion enterprise. The growth has been incredible. It's one of those few places, too, where, I tell our owner, Mr. Taylor, our majority owner is Mr. Glenn Taylor. He's a businessman from Mankato, Minnesota. It's the only privately held company with 4 million shareholders, right? Because even though Glenn Taylor owns it, everyone in the community feels like they really have an ownership piece of this team. They have an opinion. They feel like they're shareholders. They're very confident in sharing that opinion. And so it's really sort of an interesting business. So this league has gone through an incredible amount of growth, and if you think about it, sort of the shorthand history, if you think about even owners like Glenn Taylor bought in 1994 to save the team. He paid about $80 million for that team. And today, though we can't say exactly what the value of the team is, Memphis recently sold, which is a similar sort of market, for $1.4 billion. And so my sort of handicapped history of the NBA, if you think about it, the NBA really existed in a small environment, in a small world, until you had the Showtime Lakers and the Celtics battles of the '80s. And this is when David Stern comes on, and it's a major league, but it's a $350 million enterprise. And then you get the Magic Johnson and the Larry Bird battles. That evolves into the Michael Jordan era, and suddenly you have this system that is awash in cash. But it's still being run and managed by owners and people in the business that had run these small mom and pop operations. And so there was an effort to professionalize, and that's really how I came into the league, was this effort to professionalize different parts of the company. Because you run a 1.4 or $7 billion enterprise very differently than you run a enterprise that's $350 million. So as I shifted over the last couple of years, the first, I guess it would be first 12 years of my career with the team were good. It gave me exposure, and right in half of the business, I touched all different parts of the company. I also oversaw the bridge between basketball and business, so the business people that are around the players and around the coaches, we interact with them, the broadcast people, the public relations, community relations. It gave me a really good sense of the basketball side, so I was well positioned to start taking on this emerging role as Chief Strategy Officer. And that really emerged out of Mr. Taylor's thoughts, or beginning to think about succession planning. He had seen a couple of other teams in the league that had gone through a transition where the owner had passed away without a real solid succession plan. Any of you that know Mr. Taylor, he's a huge believer in community. He served in the state senate. He bought the Timberwolves to keep the team from moving here. And he began thinking about what are the things that he needed to do to successfully set up the organization so that another owner would come in and would have to retain the team here in town, and how does he begin to sort of put pieces into place. And we talked about needing to fix the basketball operations, or not fix, but develop the basketball operations into a championship sort of culture, both for the Lynx and for the Wolves. Happened a little quicker for the Minnesota Lynx than it has for the Wolves. But then we talked about facilities. And facilities are the drivers that really allow you to remain competitive. Facilities in terms of training centers where you can recruit and retain the best players or best athletes of the world, and then facilities in terms of your arena where you can generate the local revenues that you need to be able to remain competitive. And so we began that journey in 2010 with a cup of coffee with the mayor, with the chief of staff for the mayor of Minneapolis, and we completed the renovation about 7 days away from 8 years, almost to the day. We completed the Target Center renovation. But we began down a two-path process. We started with the renovation. That we knew was going to be a long process. We knew we'd have to be at the legislature. We knew we'd have to be with the city. And we went through that process. But partway through it, we found an opportunity to actually build a training center. And so we took a look initially out at the Mall of America. That was one concept. And we studied other teams. And other teams would traditionally do these training centers out in the middle of the suburbs in a nondescript building, concrete building without a lot of visibility, because the idea was the express strategy to sort of remove the players from the community and society and remove the distractions, the everyday life distractions from these athletes. And we looked at that model, but we thought, we could do something really different. And Mary Claire was with AECOM at the time, and we had a lot of conversations with them. And we wanted to flip the model on its head. And so we took a look at an urban setting. We actually found the building right across from Target Center. It was the old Block E. If you remember Block E, that failed development. It never got traction. Things came and went. And we found an opportunity to build something that really became world-class and the gold standard for the league. When we built it, it was twice as big as any other NBA training center at 107,000 square feet. Because of that, we created more of a campus. We housed not only the Timberwolves basketball operations, the Lynx basketball operations, the business operations, which, it may sound strange, but in 90% of the other teams, the business is not even located where the basketball is. They're completely different buildings, different parts of town. So it's a campus with the Timberwolves, with the Lynx, with the business operations. We also embedded a 20,000 square foot sports medicine place, or a sports medicine clinic with the Mayo Clinic. We partnered up with the Mayo Clinic, world-class brand that it is. And then we also had 3,000 square feet down on the Skyway level that was our experience center that I'll talk about in a moment. We're transitioning over to the headquarters for our fourth franchise, the T-Wolves Gaming. So that was an incredible experience, and it really it helped put us on a map. As all this is going on, of course, the Lynx are beginning to win championships. The Timberwolves, we've struggled with coaches and player transition, not quite getting our traction, but we're also trying to from a business standpoint, we're trying to figure out how do we create markers that show the public and show our fans that things are different. Even though we're not winning games, even though we're struggling with coaches, we still want to develop this reputation of excellence in ways that we can. And so the training center, we completed in 2015 and moved in. As Mary Claire mentioned, we've had over 77 people from around the world that have actually flown in and traveled to tour our facility. Spent a lot of time with the U of M and with the Vikings of the Wild, so a lot of their strategies were based upon a lot of the conversations and the findings we had. Our facility is very open, it's very transparent. I talk about the nondescript concrete bunkers that most of these are. Ours is filled with glass windows looking into offices, into conference rooms. If you come up to our lobby, you actually have a big 14-foot tall glass view right into the courts themselves. So we actually viewed the training center as a way to build a deeper relationship with our community as opposed to creating that separation. So that strategy, I think, played out very, very well and became our first chip in trying to change the perception, I think, amongst the public of who and what we are. Because again, so much of what we do is defined by the players and the coaches and what you read about every day in the newspaper. So about the time we wrapped that up, we went into, we had gotten the renovation through the legislature. We had finally gotten the agreement with the city of Minneapolis, and we began building out the renovation. It sounds like a number of you have been to Target Center and seen it. We're trying to fix a couple of fundamental flaws. At that point, Target Center had become the second oldest building arena in the NBA. The 4 other expansion teams that had come into the league in the same years had all been playing in their second building. Actually, one of the 4 teams was playing in their third building in the same time frame that we had just been in Target Center. So we were a dated building, out of date, and yet we felt it important, Glenn Taylor, being who he is, thought a more appropriate discussion was a renovation rather than a new build. In other words, we thought we could extend the life cycle of the building another 20 years, but do it at a third of the cost of building new. And of course, in this time in Minnesota, there's been 20-some years of stadium debate at the legislature, going back to when the Wild came in and discussions in St. Paul. That was followed by discussions about the Gopher football team, which was followed by discussions by the Twins, the Vikings. There was a certain amount of fatigue. And so our strategy was we wanted to be good community partners, be fiscally responsible. We thought we could renovate for a third of the cost and still accomplish fundamentally the same sort of thing. And so we were trying to solve issues like ingress and egress. Our building was kind of unique in a lot of ways because it was built on the tightest footprint in the NBA. It's why Target Center, if you, well, not that you were paying attention or thinking about things like this back then, but when they built Target Center, they actually hit bedrock early. There were supposed to be 2 more floors into Target Center. It's unique because of that. It's built up higher, 2 floors higher than it was supposed to. When you walk in at street level, you go up to walk down to your seat. Almost every other building is built at street level, and you go down into your seats. It's kind of buried into the ground. So that's also why you see Target Center cantilevers over the sidewalk. It's all because it's a very tight footprint, and we couldn't go down as deep as we wanted to. So that creates a lot of unique challenges in storage and back-of-house operational space that we had to fix. We built on an addition for a loading dock. We did fix the sort of entryways of how that worked. When Target Center was built, the front door was facing an open parking lot, and then Block E was built and developed, and so now you had this mid-block entry that no one really used, so everyone used its corner door, and the corner door was about 2 doors wide to fit 17,000 people through. It didn't work very well. So trying to fix the ingress, the egress, trying to fix the flow, that was the other thing. Target Center was built with people going up only one side of it. And that not only created problems for people coming in and out of the building, it also reduced our ability to generate revenues, because human nature is you walk into a building, you walk to your seat, you think about getting a beer. You don't think about exploring to the place you haven't been. You think about the pathway you just walked in that one place. You say, oh, they had the hot dog or the beer, and you go back to it. Well, if everyone's loading up the building only on one side, it puts all the pressure on one half of the building's concession. So lines are longer, people aren't going to wait in line to get their beer, which means we're selling less food and beverage. You're creating longer lines and a horrible experience. And yeah, in the back half of the building, you've got concession stands. It's like a wasteland. No one's there, no one's walking back there. So through the renovation, we created a new entrance on the south end that brings in about a third of the public now through that side. Put a big staircase up the back side of the building. We put a beer garden. So now we have this sort of traffic flow going all throughout the building, just making it much more efficient. So again, I would say that opened then in the fall of 2018, deemed highly successful. We actually were up for a national award, the Sports Business Journal, which is the Bible in our world. We were nominated as one of 5 facilities as the best sports facility in the country, which is remarkable considering the other competition. There are 300 buildings, sports venues in the United States that are newer than Target Center. The other venues that were up competing against us were all billion-dollar-plus facilities, stadiums, and here we were the little engine that could, the $150 million renovation. We didn't win that award, but I thought that we took a lot of solace from the fact that we were even being discussed and talked about, given the fact that we had this relatively small budget, but we thought it delivered a tremendous impact for us as a business and our fans. So that's been our journey and our pathway on facilities. Again, trying to create a couple of anchors that will sort of give us sort of a pathway to success for local revenues, remaining locally competitive for Glenn or the new owner. The second sort of leg I would say that we've focused on in the last number of years is development of new audiences in a way, and development of our organization. And so a couple of years ago, we began down a path of developing a G League team. And have any of you heard of the G League? So basketball fans, right? So the NBA was unique in that we didn't have a traditional minor league system like hockey or like baseball. We all think of baseball, of course. And so the league started with 14 teams. The old Continental Basketball Association kind of made up the core group. We fought with the players. The players' union for a long time didn't like the idea of a minor league system, but over collective bargaining discussions and negotiations over a couple of decades, slowly but surely we found a pathway to develop this league. The league was only operating 14 teams, and that meant all the basketball teams had to share. And if anyone knows anything about development, that's not a great system, because the idea is you're supposed to bring players in, teach them your system, give them the training so when they get called up that they can plug right in. Well, if you have a minor league team that's operating for 4 different franchises, that's not really occurring. So that really changed about 3 years ago, and the league decided that we were going to turn this thing into a true minor league system, that all teams would have to find a pathway to acquiring a team. It'd be a one-to-one team relationship, and so we began down the path, searched around the entire upper Midwest, and landed on Des Moines. And there's a little bit of a discussion of ideological discussion going on in the league around how that G League should develop, and it's something that we're watching today. There's sort of one model that says you should go into secondary markets like Des Moines. They don't have an NBA franchise, but we could grow the NBA brand and following in that league. You can operate it as an independent business and try to sort of cover your costs. And then the other model, driven by the basketball folks, is almost like, no, let's put them in markets that are really close to the home market, treat them almost like a practice team. And they believe in that model that they could develop the players more quickly. And we'll see how that sort of balances out. But that's an ongoing discussion with that league as it develops. But that league also becomes an incubator for us on the business side as well. It becomes an incubator for us to hire staff, train staff, try out new business strategies, business methodologies. We do a lot of innovation with our player development. We've run I don't want to say experiments, that would sound wrong. Like hydrotherapy regimens with players. We've worked with players on wearing wearable technology like Fitbits. Like, could that ever play a role in trying to help and monitor and develop these athletes into better athletes? We use it as a league for referee training and development. We practice or try out new rules. So this year, if we're watching an NBA game off of an offensive rebound, the shot clock resets at 14 instead of 24. That all came from trying it out in the G League for a year. So it really has become our incubator, and different, I guess, than the other minor league systems. I guess that's the advantage. We don't have an old legacy system that we inherited. We haven't had one, which has been challenging. But the fact that we get to start this almost fresh and new allows us to maybe create a minor league system that's a little bit different than the other sports leagues. And I would say then the third sort of pillar is we've looked out, and a lot of my time is spent is looking out in developing new markets. And I would say that this is done in primarily two different ways. One is this global growth of the NBA, and then the second is finding products and finding leagues that speak to different demographic groups. So if you think about the NBA 20 years ago, we took a look out and we said, well, half the population that's playing basketball doesn't have a league that they can aspire to, right? The women, and it's by far the most popular participatory sport in the United States for women is basketball. And so 20 years ago, the league created the WNBA, right? A pathway for the world's greatest women athletes to master their craft and to play at a professional level, earn a living playing in the WNBA. Well, that has sort of accelerated. And as we take a look out, as the league is maybe one of the most aggressive leagues in growing, one of the new demographics we've looked at is sort of finding a better pathway to onboard young people. This is a challenge in sports. The NFL, given a lot of the other issues, the growth of the NFL has sort of slowed, and they still remain the 800-pound gorilla. The NFL is the most dominant sports league in the country. But then you go to the other sports leagues, and you have baseball that's struggling. After the boomer generation, there's a huge drop-off of people that follow and play the game. And yet the NBA and MLS are sort of on a very forward-leaning, aggressive sort of growth strategy or growth positioning. And so our league took a look out and we said, okay, well, if we take a look at the younger demographic, they're experiencing basketball in a different way. Yes, they're playing basketball, but there are tens and tens of millions of people that are experiencing basketball through video games. And so 3 years ago, we began the process to start an esports league. Does anyone know what esports is? All right, good enough. So esports is professional video game players. It's one of the fastest growing industries. It was, again, it was a $100 million sort of business about 3 years ago, and this year it'll top $1 billion. Within about 3 years, it'll be a $10 billion business. So it's an incredibly, I know, a lot of shock and sort of dismay on people's faces. But yeah, I know. I've got a 16-year-old son. I know. So over the last couple of years, that's been one of the new ventures. We are part of that NBA 2K league. There are 21 of the 30 NBA teams have a team in this league, and that's been an experience unto itself. We're an expansion team. There were 17 teams that did join the league initially. 4 of us are expansion teams, and we're looking to stand that team up. But we've hired a full-time coach, full-time GM, full-time business lead, a content person, and then we'll have 6 player gamers that will join us after the draft in March. So it'll be a team, a franchise that frankly is the same size as my minor league franchise. And the players, in all honesty, will probably make more than my minor league basketball players do. So that's been an incredible growth curve. But again, the league is hyper-aggressive and trying to unite everyone around the world that has a passion for basketball, whether it's playing the game, watching the game, or playing the video game, trying to unify them under the NBA brand. And I would say that is sort of the other sort of, when we talk about growth, the other thing we've been spending an awful lot of time in is the global growth of the game in the NBA. So it's the second most popular sport in the world, second only to soccer. But unlike soccer, soccer is very fragmented. There are a lot of premier or top-level playing leagues around the world that soccer players can play soccer in. Basketball, on the other hand, there's only one elite league in the entire world, and it's the NBA. And so we compete with soccer on a global basis, but we have the advantage that we're sort of the singular brand. And so the NBA, believe it or not, is in 217 countries and territories around the world with TV deals. That's more than there are member nations in the UN. We are the world's largest social media brand, period. The NBA and our players are the world's largest social media brand. As a matter of fact, and these are things I like to talk about locally, because I think locally your context as a Timberwolves fan or a Twins fan is always, how is the team doing this year? How are they compared to the other teams in town? Who's the more interesting team? What's the storyline? Where are the players? But from our seat, increasingly, the game that goes on in Target Center is just the stage for the much larger audience. So if we have a game in Target Center, we have 17 or 18,000 people attending the game. Maybe we have a good TV rating. We've got 150,000 households around the upper Midwest that are watching the game on TV. What people don't understand is that very same game is getting 3 to 5 to 10 million eyeballs around the world. The large audience is not here. It's not the Timberwolves fans in our community. It's the Timberwolves fans all around the world. So social media, for example, I say we're the world's largest social media brand. You could take the 15 players of the Timberwolves in our team, and you take all of our social media followers around the world. They are 3 times larger than the Twins, the Wild, the Vikings, and their 200 athletes combined. So that's the power of the NBA. So as we look at sort of developing and growing sort of new audiences, it's reaching down to a younger generation, finding a different way to connect with them. And it's, of course, supporting the WNBA that sort of reaches to the female demographic to a certain degree. But then it's also looking at growing this sport around the world and finding ways all across the globe. And I think with esports, that's going to be another way for us to grow the game. You don't have all the overhead. You don't need to build arenas and facilities and spend gazillions of dollars on players, because it scales very quickly. Because the way that esports works is you play in a studio and you have millions and millions of people watching from all around the world. No different than we tune in and watch maybe Jim and Dave sort of do the play-by-play and the color commentary for us on the Timberwolves game. People like my son, my 6-year-old son, are tuning in and watching people playing video games all around the world in different video game leagues. So those are, and I've gone on longer. Oh my gosh, what time are we supposed to wrap up?
I think 1:15.
Okay, all right, so I've gone on and on and on and on. I'm a talker, can't take it out of me. I'd love to answer any questions if we have time, but that's maybe just a little bit of a glimpse into sort of the Timberwolves that you don't necessarily think about when you think about the Timberwolves. But that's how we look at things. That's sort of the trajectory. That's a bit of the pathway that we see as an individual franchise, as a collection of franchises, and even the league as we chase. And I think we really have an opportunity over the next 20 years to be the dominant sports league in the world. We're certainly catching up on the NFL. And then, globally, we have the advantage of being under that singular banner as opposed to fragmented like soccer. So it's an exciting time to be part of the NBA for sure. With that, I'll take questions.
Why do you think the NFL has been so slow to pick up on social media since the success?
I can't really speak as to why other leagues or other teams haven't done things. I would say maybe the advantage the NBA has is, and I go back to this all, whether it was planned or purposeful or it happened by accident and someone realized it and we decided to jump on board, is the NBA is sort of integrated into pop culture much differently than most of the other sports leagues. One, we have the advantage of our players. Our players are more recognizable than any other players in any other sports. Part of it is they're super tall. Right? You can't look out at a crowd and not go, hey, that 7-foot guy might play basketball. The second thing is, right, we don't have helmets. We don't have masks. So everyone's looking and staring at those faces on TV. You get to know the face and profile of our athletes. And 3, because of the play of the action is so small. You're not looking out 50 yards to see a little football player or baseball player. When you're at a game, you're right on top of the game. You're seeing people, you're seeing faces. So our players are highly recognizable, one. And two, the league has just, again, integrated into pop culture so differently than others. You know, sneaker culture, you go back to, you think about, McDonald's commercials, it's Jordan. It's basketball, and basketball players have become so much more part of American pop culture. You think about music, you think about sneaker culture. The NBA is there in a different way than a lot of the other teams. And I think because of that, and because of the individual nature of the players and the following they can create, we're able to engage in a different way. And then globally, that would be the other thing, is the other advantage we have is because of the fact our games are seen all around the world and our players are so recognizable. You know, Andrew Wiggins, Karl Anthony Towns can have 10 million followers, and it just allows us to sort of speak to a different audience that other teams and other athletes don't have. Yeah.
Questions about your E-League. First of all, when does that launch? And then is the season similar to standard basketball where they're going to be playing the same link?
Yeah, so T-Wolves Gaming is the name. We announced that we are joining. We unveiled the logo in December. We're building out our training center, which is on the Skyway level. So our campus will have that sort of fourth practice facility. The draft is in March. We had an expansion draft where we picked up our first 2 players. The full draft is in March, where we'll pick up the other 4 players from a pool of 250 gamers that have been identified and come through the combine. Training camp then is March. It's just like everything else. And then the season begins the first week of April, and it runs through August. And the interesting thing with esports, it's going to be slightly different. It's maybe more like a soccer model in Europe. We alternate between 4 weeks of league play that count against your record towards the playoffs, and then 3 times during the year we stop and we do a single elimination tournament. And so we'll go into tournament mode. So we'll play for 4 to 5 weeks, we'll stop, and then we'll have a winner-take-all tournament where there might be a prize pool of $300,000 the players are playing for. And we'll do a tournament, and then we'll go back to league play, break, tournament, league play. So, and playoffs will take place in August. And it's sort of strange, and you could get me geeked out on this because I started as a doubter a year and a half ago, as you can imagine. So anything that falls outside the lines comes to Ted Johnson, right? And so talking with the owner, talking with the commissioner, they're talking about this, and I'm going, oh my God, this is going to be my next thing. And my son is, I'm constantly arguing with my son to get off of video games. I'm going, great. And I was a doubter, but the more I've gotten into it, the more I begin to understand, and I see the potential, and I understand why. But one of the interesting things I think about our e-sport, other than other games, is we're still fundamentally a team sport. So the way it gets played different, if you buy NBA 2K, you're just one person and everything else is controlled by the computer. So you pass and you pass to another player, you become that player, but it's really just you and then artificial intelligence. The NBA 2K League, if you see 10 players on the screen, every one of those 10 is controlled by an individual, right? So the same sort of tenets of teamwork and basketball strategy apply, because just like you have to know where to go and set a pick on the floor, you have to know where your avatar on the screen has to be to set a pick for your teammate. You have to run plays. You have to know where you need to be in position and where you have to roll out to, and first option, second option. So it's maybe more respectable than the other esports, but it's interesting. And so when we hired a coach. He's relatively old. He's 39. And so amongst the players, he's considered ancient. But he loves to play the game, and he's got credibility as a player, but he's also in real life a D3 basketball coach. And we specifically went and got someone that actually has coached young men and understands basketball strategy. And he fully intends to not only train in the video game, but actually bring the kids out and get them on the floor and try to help them understand spacing and because some of these video game players, yes, some played basketball, but some just grew up playing video games. And so part of our challenge is going to be to teach them the game that will make them a little more coachable. So.
Question, sorry. Do the teams have any input on coding?
On
Coding.
Not specifically. So the NBA 2K League is a joint venture with the NBA and Take-Two. Take-Two is the manufacturer of NBA 2K, the video game. So we work very closely with the developers. The developers do develop a specific game that the league plays upon, and based upon feedback, changes the game. Simple things like last year. Now, last year was the first year. Simple things like we heard from the video game community that they didn't like watching the traditional side-to-side play like you, because that's the way it started, is like you see it on TV, it pans from left to right, right to left, it follows the game like that. The esports community wanted to see it more from an end view because they could see the plays being developed a little bit better on the TV screen. So actually flipped the view mid-season in how that game was broadcast all around the world. This year they've made changes to little bugs, or players maybe found a way to almost, it's not like cheat codes, but they kind of found ways to edge the system, and they came up with little advantages. So those are all being developed out of the system to, again, try to create more of a neutral environment. So I'm sure it will evolve year to year, but it's not that the players get to code, but we provide collective feedback as a league and as players into the developers. Yeah.
What's your average age group?
For the esports? For viewers or players? Players, they're young. They have to be 18 before they're eligible for the draft. Yeah, but they're going to be 18 to 22, which is not that different from our NBA players or WNBA players. You know, the one thing I'd say it's really different is even when we started the WNBA, there was infrastructure. As kids came up, they played. There was an amateur system, whether it was AAU or high school. They had a college system. So there was more structure to it. The interesting thing about the esports is it's the Wild West. There is no structure. These kids didn't come up growing up in league play or with teams. So even though they're the same age as our other athletes, they're maybe more naive than our other athletes. That's one observation I've had as I have observed, and we're looking. And so we're spending a lot of time on player development, which is something you do traditionally in all your teams anyways. But we're going to spend an inordinate amount of time with player development with these young people because they haven't been in front of cameras before. They haven't had a system by which they've kind of been mentored and coached by other coaches all the way along. So a lot of this, kind of shockingly, is relatively new to them, like how to behave, how to work with teammates, because they're not used to working with other people, right? They're alone playing their own video game. So some things that we all take for granted for any of us that have played team sports are kind of new concepts for a lot of the players. Then we'll go. Yeah.
You mentioned about the history of the WNBA, and it allowed women to play professionally and make a living at it. And I just wonder, do you feel that the pay disparity between the women and the men, I mean, can they really make a living at it? And do you ever see the gap closing a little bit as time goes on?
Yeah, I think it's a big question that the league is wrestling with right now. For those of you that hadn't heard, the WNBA players had an opt-out on their collective bargaining agreement, and they decided to exercise it. So after this season, we're going to have to go back and negotiate a new collective bargaining agreement. And I would say at the heart of it is this sort of question, right? We're now 20 years in as a league. Our WNBA players can make a living, but no, it's not comparable, right? So you might make $100,000 in the WNBA, and the NBA, the junior players making $3-4 million. So I think that the league is looking to work with the players and maybe think about or challenge this model. And this is something too. I don't have all the facts at my fingertips, but I think there's a lot of unnecessary sort of angst over the WNBA, especially when I work with reporters and media. They're always asking about, can this league survive? But they forget that, the first 30, 40 years of the NBA, the first 50 years of Major League Baseball, NFL, were incredibly volatile. Teams closing, moving, shifting, folding. The NBA went down to 11 teams at one point and came back. The NBA until the 1970s were playing in venues with 10,000 people in it. The Armory in Minneapolis. I mean, they weren't in 20,000 person arenas. And I think, in hindsight, looking at it, in our effort to sort of instantly create this big credibility, big presence, with the NBA setting the WNBA up like that, we may have hurt ourselves because we maybe sort of set false expectations. All these other leagues had an opportunity to grow organically over decades, to create following and grow and grow and grow. The WNBA was kind of artificially set there and said, we're here today, it's all here. So I think over the next year, it's a big conversation that we're having with the players to sort of think about it, and do we change it a little bit? Do we allow the WNBA to grow a little bit more authentically? Do we get into smaller venues? Do we put the season back with the normal basketball season? Because right now they play in the summer. Well, everybody up here knows the last place you typically want to be on a nice summer day is inside, right? After spending 9 months hunkered down inside all winter long. So those types of questions I think we're going to be exploring over the next year to see if we can sort of put it on a slightly different footing. But the commitment is there.
So in kind of with that, the E-League, is it men and women?
It is, and it's right now though I'd say it is predominantly male. Right. Of the 250 candidates that are eligible to be drafted, only 2 are female. But that is a big effort on all of our parts, is to recruit and get more female gamers involved. Yep.
So what are I know you can't share, but so Coach Ryan Saunders has been pretty well embraced, but what are you thinking will be the outcome of that?
I'd hate to speculate.
I know.
No, I'll tell you what, the Ryan is, right, I mean, one, it's a great sentimental story, right? A lot of us have known Ryan since he was that big because he was around with Flip over Flip's 2 terms with the team. He's definitely set up as an interim only, and for him it's a no-lose. He's 32, his second youngest coach in the NBA, right, ever. No one holds it against him if he doesn't get the job, and if he doesn't get the job, he's going to be the youngest guy with head coaching experience ever in the history of the league. So for him it's a no-lose, but I would say that people are generally pleasantly surprised at the success. He's been able to turn it into more than just a caretaker role short term. It's real clear that the players love him and love to play for him. And the NBA is a players' league, right? So the coach is kind of there to resolve some conflict and maybe decide some playing time. But the players really drive the league and almost coach themselves out on the floor. So. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think his chances have gotten better over the course of the season than maybe when it all began, but we'll have to get through the season.
So the question I had is kind of with that, the tragic Flip Saunders situation. How does an organization recover? Because I thought at that point the Timberwolves had a clear direction on where they were going, and all of a sudden it wasn't there anymore. How does an organization recover from that?
Yeah, well, it's a challenge, and this is where I'd sort of bifurcate it a little bit. That is sort of the public, if I could say this right. It's a little bit like what we're talking about today. That's sort of the public perception of how the organization is and how it functions. In reality, for 200 people coming to work every day and the owner, we think about the team more like I just described. We're building an organization, a franchise that's trying to build audience, grow the game, grow revenues, grow different franchises. And so Flip wasn't the be-all, end-all to the organization, but he was very much the be-all, end-all on the basketball side, which is what most people think and associate. So it didn't impact the organization that way, right? Because the death of Flip didn't change our long-term strategy, our growth pattern, the need to do these building blocks for the organization. But he certainly changed the outcome of what the team was going to be able to do. And that's been a challenge, and we haven't figured out a way, right? Because to your point, he had a real clear vision of how he wanted to build this back. He felt very confident in his ability on how to put the young pieces together. He had done it before. And suddenly we have some other person's vision, and we're trying to find a coach to hand it over to, and clearly we found the wrong person, right? Came in, had a very different vision, didn't see the pieces the same way Flip had seen it, and yet he's kind of got one arm tied behind his back as he's handed a team, which then led us to go back out, I think, and as long as you have Karl Anthony Towns, right, you have somebody to build a franchise around. And you've got to do it while you have Cat under contract, and thankfully he re-signed, so we've got him 5 more years. But you got to find a coach that is maybe aligned with him and how that will pull together. So, yeah, I mean, it's tragic, it was tough on all of us, but it didn't necessarily shake us to our core like it probably was seen on the public side. And I'll stick around and talk more and answer questions. So.
Do you have one more question? I was just going to ask him his take on the Jimmy Butler fiasco.
Oh, Lordy. And I've seen a few. I mean, I was a guy going into the locker room. If you remember Latrell Sprewell, can't feed his family on 20. Yeah, I was the guy going into the locker room saying, you know, Spree, I think you got to go back on. He told me to put my head where the sun don't shine, but the Jimmy Butler thing was, it was a debacle, and I think unfortunately we, as an organization, maybe had opportunities to manage it a little bit differently that didn't happen, which resulted later on with the coach leaving as well. But it's, you know, my 15 years, I haven't seen many things like that. It was crazy. So.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Ted, so much for coming out, and we look forward to continuing the Timberwolves season, and we're excited about the Minnesota Lynx. I didn't even get to ask my question about Lindsey gone and my Moore taking a year off, but...
I purposely talked too long.
Well, you've got a great coach in Cheryl Reeves, so I'm sure she will put a winning team together again. So we look forward to watching that. So now, if Ann could bring forward, we have Ted, if I can ask you to draw the winning card for those Timberwolves tickets for the February 25th game against the Sacramento Kings. So I know you won't look. Come on, Ted!
Wow, someone's got a high film dense card.
Well, go ahead.
Dr. Jamie.
Well, you get to take one other lucky friend. I think we're all available. So if we sign up for Leadership Hudson, you might consider us.
Oh, yeah, that's
Well, thank you, Ted, and to Susan for all your help in getting that coordinated too. So again, thank you to today's sponsor, Midwest One Bank. We appreciate your support. I look forward to see you on March 12th for our next Good Morning Hudson program. And thank you again for coming, and safe travels the rest of the day. And thank you for your support of the Hudson Chamber. Have a good afternoon.